My name's Suryagupta, if you're just joining joining myself and David. David's behind the camera. And this is an Ask a Buddhist session. And really these sessions, we thought about these sessions after we closed. We closed over a week ago. And actually almost 2 weeks ago now, we closed the Buddhist Centre. And we thought that these would be helpful to have a space where you could ask any immediate questions you had in response to the COVID-19. So this is kind of like, what's the Buddhist perspective on COVID-19 and different aspects of that. We're getting a lot of analysis from scientists and economists and health practitioners, and they're really valuable. But what's a Buddhist perspective? Or at least this particular Buddhist perspectives on it. So in a way, it's just here for the next few weeks, just to kind of answer those questions. We'll be here again probably next week as well, from the centre or from the comfort of my own home. So thank you very much. Last week we had a lot of questions around dealing with anxiety and fear. So I want to thank you for those. And if you haven't listened to that one, I would recommend you go back there and listen to that video on what Buddhist response to that is, dealing with anxiety and fear, transforming anxiety and fear, because they can be transformed. And today, really some substantial questions have come in, really thoughtful questions. So I want to thank you again for sending those questions in. And they were quite varied, I would say, although a few of them had some overlap. So I'm going to dive into one question, and then we'll see if we can tie in one or two others in that, okay? So I'm going to start with Stephen's question. So hi Stephen, if you're listening, thanks very much. And you asked a question I think is on a lot of people's minds right now, and that is, could it be that humanity is going to be in a better place after this experience, after the crisis, that the challenge that we're in right now? And what you said, Stephen, was that at first you thought that we might all become or you see people becoming more, driven by 3 poisons, you called them, which is a traditional way of Buddhists describing greed, hatred, and ignorance. These are sort of negative mental states that we can get into as human beings. That's sort of there sometimes as a sort of instinctive response to when we feel threatened, or when we want things, or when we don't want things. And from a Buddhist perspective, they cause our suffering. They cause our personal suffering and our collective suffering, greed, hatred, and ignorance. And you were thinking, Stephen, that this crisis will somehow, show that more. But what you've been maybe touched by, moved by, as have many people, is the acts of kindness that you're seeing, the kind of compassionate responses to the situation. So you're wondering, actually, could this be, one of the positive things that could come out of this is a change in how we relate to each other, maybe that we'll even value each other much more as human beings. So great question, and I think the one that lots of people are thinking about in different kind of ways. And I think it's partly because we're trying to make sense of this experience. We're trying to think, what does it mean that we've been thrown into this challenge? And it's a global challenge. No one's not experiencing it right now. So I had some thoughts around that. And what came to mind, of course, last night, actually, if you're in London, you would have seen or heard the people lots of people standing outside their houses, outside their flats, and applauding the NHS workers, applauding all the carers. And it didn't happen down my street, so it didn't happen down my particular street. However, loads of people contacted me and said how moving it was. And certainly when I've seen the images, on the TV and things, I've really been moved myself. And it started, I think, in Spain or Italy, and then France was doing it, and it's great that it's happened here. So we're seeing this sort of collective response. And what that's highlighting is the fact that the NHS have been there, the National Health Service that we have has been there all this time, of course, and many people have really responded to them in the past. My son and I, we were in a car accident about 5 years ago, and I for myself, felt deeply moved by how people were responding to us and the kindness they showed us. So many people have been experiencing what they've been doing. However, this has been, in a way, now they're sort of putting themselves in the front line, because they're putting themselves in sort of danger in a way. They're working in very challenging conditions for the benefit of all, for our benefit. And, you know, they're one group of people doing so. But we have other people doing so as well. We have cashiers, we have refuse collectors, we have people delivering our post, delivering our packages, our food. So many people right now are, you know, helping us continue live and helping benefit in us, even at a cost to themselves. And it does bring this gratitude, it does bring an appreciation and a recognition. And it's fantastic that we're not just feeling that individually, but we're experiencing that collectively, and we're expressing that. Last week, I think, maybe even on Monday this week, the government, this UK government, asked for 250,000 volunteers for the NHS. And they didn't get 250,000 volunteers, they got something like 420 plus and counting volunteers. So that was interesting for me, because I thought somehow we're appreciating what has been sometimes a workforce that's gone unnoticed, that's gone unrecognised, that's low status often, or low pay. We're recognising this workforce, we're feeling this appreciation and this gratitude. And the response from that, and it's very sort of it's a very natural response, is to want to give back. In Buddhism, generosity is a very positive, mental state. To give back. Gratitude, of course, is a positive mental state. If we can see that something's benefiting us, the natural response is to give, to want to give, and to express that appreciation. So it's fantastic that that's happening on a collective level. So about 2,500 years ago, the Buddha said that our life is sustained by others. That was one of, it was a set of teachings he gave. He gave 10 reflections for those of us wanting to move from greed, hatred and ignorance, to move from that to love, wisdom and awareness. If we want to do that, we need to reflect on these 10 things. And one of these 10 things was, my very life, your very life is sustained by others. Now, I mentioned this to my son, actually, before I came. I said, no, this is a teaching, what do you think? He was like, is that right? And I said, yeah. And he goes, well, I said, how do you think it is? And he shrugged his shoulders, and then, you know, looked at his plate of food that he was eating, and, it's very clear then, okay, his actual life right now is sustained by others, because he didn't produce that food there. He might have put it together, but he didn't produce it. He didn't even bring it into our house, actually. I did that, some of that, and we've had deliveries as well. So, and of course, we've had all the other operations that enable that to happen. So it just began to sort of dawn on him, oh right, yes, and the clothes that he sits in, and the table he's sitting in, the house that we live in, etc., etc., etc. So our very life is sustained by others is a really fundamental teaching. And this teaching, reflection that we can do daily. And this teaching comes out of reflection comes out of a bigger teaching, if you like, on the fact that we are interdependent with each other. The Buddha said we often see ourselves, one of our things that we're not conscious of is, or we're not very aware of, is that we see ourselves as separate, fixed individuals. So I'm sitting here and David's sitting across me, and I can see myself as very separate to David, and there's really, there's not much, that I can exist completely without David, if you like, and that we don't necessarily have much in common. We do actually have loads in common, I know that. But that's often how we see each other. What the Buddha said is that is an illusion, that's a delusion. We actually are all of us, all of humanity is deeply interdependent with each other. And yes, in a way, what the virus has done is shown us, in a difficult way, in a challenging way, that one person's action will affect another's. That we leave a trace. Wherever we go, we can leave a trace. And the virus has really shown that to us. But the acts of kindness that you've been seeing, Stephen, is also showing us that we can also affect each other really deeply positively. And there's often a choice as to which way we go. And in a way, the Buddhist training that we have, the meditations and the teachings, are helping us make the best choice we can make to move in the direction of love, wisdom, and awareness. So, for example, if you're living by yourself right now, thinking of that teaching, thinking of that your life is sustained by others, can actually be really positive for you, because it means that, you know, when you get a post through the letterbox, or somebody drops you an email, somebody dropped me an email just before I came, said, just thinking of you, wishing you well, we're self-isolating, etc. It's kind of like actually one of those things lifted my mood. I thought that's really great to hear them and to know that they're okay. So that already had an effect on me, them doing that. So if you're on your own, thinking about your life as sustained by others, you can broaden your sense of your community, who is benefiting you in that moment in time, and broaden the sense that you're not alone, you're not isolated, because actually you've been benefited. Your people are benefiting you in all different ways, seen and unseen ways, and that can help us feel more connected, less separate, less isolated. If you're living with people, that's a challenge for a lot of people right now, because we're spending a lot of time with people that we live with. But again, if we realise that we're very interdependent with each other, that we're not separate, we're interdependent, we become much more sensitive and aware of our actions. And if we see that our actions have caused somebody some, discomfort or upset, then we can be open to hearing that, and open to change. And likewise, we can also, share ourselves with others in that way that we live with too. So, reflecting on that teaching again and again, that our life is sustained by others, opens up that bigger teaching that we're deeply interdependent. And if we can access that teaching, not just intellectually, but as a real heartfelt response, so it becomes naturally how we are, we become more sensitive, we become more ethical, actually. We become, our outlook moves from just looking after ourselves to being able to look out for others. And this brings in Sarah's question. Sarah had a question, hi Sarah, if you're there. You had a question that it seemed that governments were sort of making us sort of stay at home, in some governments, by threats or fines. And that was interesting. And you were wondering, could we not come from well, this is how I interpreted your question. You were sort of wondering, could we not come from a deeper motivation? Do we have to have threats to help to make us act for the benefit of ourselves and others? So I thought that was interesting. And it definitely brings in ethics here. We can have the same action, so we can all say stay at home, or we can all, not stockpile, for example. We can have the same action, but it could be motivated in different ways. So one could be, well, we might get in trouble, or people might disapprove, or we're threatened by something, or even that, well, everybody else is doing it, so I better do it. That's one set of motivations. As Buddhists, what we're trying to do, we're trying to train ourselves to come from that deeper motivation, so it's not externally driven, that we come from a real awareness that actually my well-being affects your well-being, and your well-being affects my well-being. So we then want to naturally act for the benefit of others. So that's what we're trying to do in the practice. That's why we meditate. There's certain meditations that really help us get that sense directly. At the Buddhist Centre, that's what we're here for. I'm here at the Buddhist Centre because I've benefited from the teachings. I appreciate the fact that people have gone before me and led the way and shown that it's really possible to practice meditation, to live ethically in a way that's joyful, that's positive and healthy, and inspiring. I've been guided by others, and I'm here because I've benefited. I want to give back. Reflecting on this teaching that we're all interdependent helps us be more sensitive, helps us be more aware of ourselves and others, and actually releases many more positive mental states, such as generosity, such as appreciation, such as gratitude. So I do hope, Stephen and Sarah, that this experience we're in will enable us to collectively raise our level of consciousness. I really do hope that. It's not a given, though. It does take more and more of us to commit to working on our minds, to transforming our hearts, transforming the negative emotions that we have. And we need to then influence our governments so that they're also inspired by that too. I've seen it happen on the, it's been great, all these online things happening. There was a DJ that did a party that was just uplifting and loads of people joined in. There was a personal trainer on their roof doing exercises, so people in their flats could actually get some exercises. And of course, whoever started that campaign to applaud the NHS, for example, and the health services around Europe have also recognised the importance of acting positively for the benefit of others. And they didn't need governments to tell them to do that. They just did that. So the last thing I'll say on this is that it is a train for us as Buddhists. That's why we're here. We want to show people the way to transform their minds, and we're doing that we're doing that ourselves. And but we can't do it alone. We need to do it in community, because it's not easy actually to move from greed, hatred, and ignorance to love, wisdom, and awareness. We need the practices. We need each other. We need to see that it's possible. So do join us, for what we're doing online. There'll be a link below that you can check in and subscribe to so you can see all the different activities. And do send more questions in. Thank you for joining me. Yeah, thank you.